boy walks through the door of a police station covered in blood. "They are all dead. They have all been shot," he cries. At first, the police officers suspect an attack, but the truth is darker than they could ever imagine. This is not a story about an ordinary family on an ordinary farm. This is a story of unspeakable horror from inside a house, and the culprit was closest to home. The Griekwastad family murders, one of South Africa's most shocking family tragedies, now in full detail. On the evening of April 6, 2012, the police station in the small town of Griekwastad in the Northern Cape region of South Africa was as peaceful as usual, until a young boy, covered in blood, stumbled through the door and fell to his knees. Covered in blood, 15-year-old Don Steenkamp cried out pleadingly to the officers, "You have to come. You have to come. They've been shot. They are all dead." The breathless teenager's words turned an ordinary holiday evening into a nightmare. As the police officers tried to understand what this scream of terror meant, they were about to step into a terrible family tragedy that they were not yet aware of. Nauhoek Farm, located in the vast northern Cape steppe about 8 kilometers from the town of Griekwastad, was home to the Steenkamp family. The Steenkamps were one of the wealthiest and most respected farmers in the region. On April 6, 2012, they were taking advantage of the Christian holiday of Good Friday to spend time with their children on the farm. Don Steenkamp, the head of the family, was 44 years old. His wife, Christel, was 43 years old, and their child, Marthella, was 14 years old. They could not have imagined what would happen at the end of the peaceful day. It was a nightmare. In the evening, as sunset approached, life went on as usual at the farmhouse. Don Steenkamp was on the phone with his father at around 17:49, and Christel Steenkamp sent an SMS to her sister at 18:34. But as soon as the sun disappeared over the horizon and dusk fell, the idyllic scene gave way to a bloody atrocity. Around 18:19, gunshots shattered the silence of the farmhouse. In the following hours, it emerged that Don, Christel, and Marthella Steenkamp had been brutally shot dead inside their home. Their bloodied bodies would be found in various parts of the house with multiple gunshot wounds. The assailant had shot each of them repeatedly, as if in a fit of rage. Immediately after those moments of terror, Don Steenkamp sped away from the farm in a vehicle. By 19 Halid, he was the one who arrived at the Griekwastad police station to inform officers that his family had been killed. The young son claimed to be the only survivor and claimed to know nothing about the perpetrator. When the townspeople and the police initially investigated, they initially thought it might have been a farm raid by outside assailants. It was thought to be another in a series of robbery or politically motivated farm murders that unfortunately occur from time to time in South Africa. Don supported this assumption by telling the police that he was not at home at the time of the gunshots, that he was in the barn in the farmyard and did not see the assailants. Soon, however, the scene began to whisper that these murders were not a simple robbery. First, one of the neighboring farmers never forgot the horrific sight he encountered when he rushed to the scene as soon as he heard the news. The dogs wandering in the yard of the farmhouse had their mouths covered in clotted human blood as they licked the puddles of blood from the ground. The neighbor who rushed home was shocked by the sight before he saw the horror inside. The first officers to enter the house found the bodies of Don and Christel Steenkamp lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and little Marthella dying next to her mother. Apparently, the unfortunate girl had been severely wounded by bullets, but did not die immediately. She had died on the spot after struggling in her last moments as if trying to call for help. Each of the family members had been brutally murdered inside their home. The scene shocked the police and the townspeople. Don Steenkamp's body was found next to the dining room table. It was as if he had tried to defend himself in a last-ditch effort, but had slipped and fallen in a pool of blood. The bodies of Christel and her daughter Marthella were found lying side by side in the TV room. The walls and floor of the house presented a horrific picture of bullet holes and blood spatter from close-range gunshots. On this Good Friday evening, A peaceful family farm was suddenly transformed into one of South Africa's most preposterous crime scenes. The investigation into the murder of the Steenkamp family took months of detailed work to uncover the truth step by step. At first, the police started to search for possible external assailants based on the scenario described by Don Steenkamp. They were looking for clues such as empty shell casings, footprints, a broken window, and a forced door. However, there was no sign of a burglary. Even the 6 cell phones in the house, the cash in the wallets, and the shotguns hanging on the wall were untouched. The family gun safe is in the master bedroom of the house. All the weapons inside were intact. If there had indeed been a robbery or an attack from outside, one would expect the attackers to have made off with valuables, money, or weapons. But nothing was stolen. This raised questions from the very first moment. As police teams continued to carefully examine the crime scene, one finding after another began to challenge Don's story. For example, on the night of the murders, a fresh nail wound was noticed on Don's neck. When asked about this during the interrogation, Don claimed that he and his sister Marthella had had a small fight the afternoon before the murders, during which his neck was scratched. However, a later criminal examination of Marthella's fingernails matched Don's DNA. It turned out that the young girl had struggled with her brother shortly before his death. This proved that Don had in fact been in a physical struggle with Marthella during the time he claimed to have been in the barn. Technological investigations also put Don's assertions in a corner. According to cell phone records, Christelle Steenkamp sent an SMS to her sister at 6:34 p.m. on April 6, 2012, so she was alive at that time. Don, on the other hand, had spoken to his grandfather on the phone at 19:02, and the call was made from the city center. So Don was already in town by that time. Allegedly, as soon as he heard the gunshots, he left the house and drove to call for help. However, the scenario of a massacre taking place in such a short period of time, less than half an hour, and Don reaching a town 8 to 10 kilometers away and informing the police did not seem plausible. Moreover, although Don said in his first statement that he was not at all sure of the number or identity of the attackers, police records show that as soon as he came to the police, he stated unequivocally that they had killed my parents and my sister, and that they were all dead. The prosecutor's office pointed out that a panicked 15-year-old boy could not have known with such certainty that all his family members were dead if he was not present at the time of the incident. Such contradictions did not go unnoticed by detectives who deepened the investigation. In the later stages of the investigation, the prime suspect increasingly turned to an insider, Don Steenkamp, who initially appeared to be the victim. A comprehensive investigation team was set up, led by Colonel Dick DeWall, an experienced homicide detective from the Northern Cape Police. The team reviewed all the evidence with scientific rigor. The picture became clearer as the house was pieced together, the ballistics and the testimonies were put together. The killer knew the inside of the house and the family very well. Analysis of the bullet marks at the crime scene indicated that there was no second person in the house at the time of the murder. The assailant had carried out this act alone, using 2 different weapons consecutively. If there had been more than one assailant, it would have been expected that they would have fired their weapons at the same time. But the evidence showed that this was the planned work of one person. According to the prosecution, the killer in the house was very familiar with the environment and the order of the house. This pointed to none other than the young son of the family. Still, the police remained cautious and spent months considering all possibilities. The investigation even uncovered some interesting and diversionary reports. Sometime after the murders, an AWB member came out of prison with a sensational confession that she and her far-right extremist group had committed the murders. She claimed that they had attacked the Steenkamp family in order to instill fear in white farmers. But when the police took this claim seriously and investigated it, they found it to be a complete fabrication. Colonel DeWall made it clear in court that there was not a shred of truth in his account. Don himself had also tried different narratives to deflect suspicion. At one point, he implied to a town official that his father had had a money dispute with a client who had made threats. Another time, he mentioned in passing to a family friend that a farm laborer might be targeting them. None of these allegations, however, were backed up by hard evidence. Don's lawyers even tried a defensive maneuver by trying to pin the findings of sexual abuse on Marthella on his father Dion. They came up with extreme hypotheticals, such as that perhaps Marthella had been abused by her father. After all these efforts, on August 12, 2012, the investigation team mobilized. Colonel DeWall and his team formally charged Don Steenkamp that day and executed the arrest warrant. The arrest took place in the dormitory of Grey College, where Don was studying. The arrest of 17-year-old Don, who was taken from school, was announced as breaking news across the country. After 4 months as a victim, the young boy was now handcuffed as a suspected murderer. This made headlines in the South African press and caused deep divisions in the small community of Griekwastad. Some thought that the police might be wrong, that an innocent boy was being accused, while others began to talk about the reality of a scenario they had suspected all along. Before this incident, Don Steenkamp gave the impression of being a perfectly normal young man. He was a student at a prestigious school like Grey College, a regular churchgoer, a sports champion named after a national-level athlete. He had been lovingly raised by his parents and was known as a well-adjusted boy, active in social activities. But when the dark secrets that lay beneath the calm, beneath the surface were revealed, they would shock everyone. According to court records, Don had harbored a long-hidden perverted sexual urge for his sister Marthella. No one realized this until the day of the incident. However, forensic evidence showed that Marthella had been raped in the hours before she was murdered, approximately 12 to 24 hours, and that this was not the first time. In light of these findings, the judge concluded that the main motivation for the murders was to cover up the sexual assault of Marthella. The judge emphasized that Don had tried to forcibly have sexual intercourse with his sister, tortured her with sadistic methods when she resisted, and then, fearing that the young girl would tell her parents, had eliminated both Marthella and her parents, who would have found out about the incident. So it was not a simple outburst of anger, but a horrific plan designed to conceal his own guilt. Indeed, the autopsy and ballistics showed that the murders were cold-blooded and premeditated. Each of the family members was first shot and wounded with a .357 Magnum revolver pistol, followed by close-range execution-style lethal shots to the head with a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle. The bullet trajectories showed that the first shots hit their bodies, but were mostly non-fatal, followed almost immediately afterward by a second gunshot to the head. This gruesome method suggested that the killer had killed in cold blood, taking his targets one by one to be sure. The weapons used all belonged to the family, and the assailant had taken them with him, rather than leaving them lying around. Police were shocked to find a .22 caliber rifle and a .357 caliber pistol in the car Don had brought to the police station. These were the family's own weapons. And the fact that Don had brought them with him would be one of the first signs that the story of unknown assailants that he had been telling all along would be compromised. Marthella's brutality was one of the most gruesome aspects of the case. The young girl's body showed signs of a serious struggle. In the words of the judge, Marthella had tried to defend herself by fighting like a tiger. The wounds and bruises on his body showed that he had struggled with his attacker and had not given up easily, resisting until the last moment. Unfortunately, even though he was a 15-year-old brother, he seemed to be completely devoid of compassion. Don Steenkamp's psychological makeup was also scrutinized during the trial. The teenager, who was 15 years old at the time of the crime, stunned even experts with his callous and cold-blooded behavior after the murders. In the months before his arrest, when he was released on bail, he went about his daily life as if nothing had happened. Staying with family friends, Don rode the horse belonging to his recently murdered sister and participated in competitions. He displayed a relaxed demeanor in social situations. When his trial began, observers in the courtroom could not see the slightest sign of remorse or grief in his demeanor. According to journalists, during the hearings, Don's gaze sometimes went so far as to ogle the bodies of the women in the courtroom. His reckless behavior in the midst of such a serious trial was chilling to the viewers. Even when the verdict of guilty of murder, rape, and all other crimes was read to his face, he did not shed a single tear. He did not even show any noticeable reaction. This has been interpreted as his inability to truly comprehend or care about the gravity of his actions. Criminology experts who supported the defense team in the case testified that Don was a mentally healthy, well-adjusted young man with no signs of mental illness, which meant that he was fully competent at the time he committed the murders. The judge also noted that the defendant showed no signs of remorse in committing the atrocious crimes, and he based his sentencing decision accordingly. All these findings unfortunately painted the profile of Don Steenkamp as an antisocial and callous criminal. On the outside, he was the well-bred young son of a respectable family, but on the inside he had a dark mind capable of planning and executing an unspeakable atrocity against his own family. This murder from within, committed by a seemingly innocent young son, was a painful example to everyone that the unthinkable is possible. This concludes this video, and we will see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves very well.